Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun, and this is our Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 6 reaction and review. Don't worry, there are no hidden cameras. There's no security cameras around here. We are all fine. We are all safe. We are not going to be bolting out of this video at any point to drive off into the distance.
Nobody's watching us except you guys.
Hey!
Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. This was a really exciting episode. That note at the end is going to be a big question that we are going to be talking about.
Yeah.
I'm watching you. All three of them got that note. It is the exact same note that Jan got in season 1. We are going to be diving much deeper into that because we've spent an unhealthy amount of time comparing the handwriting to what Jan got to what was on these screens of these phones, which was the white background with what looks like a black Sharpie. There are some letters that are very similar and there are some that are not, but is this the same person? I'm going to just be 100%. And I'm going to be like, it's the same person. I think it's the same person. What do you guys think? Is this the same person? If it is, this brings in that whole idea that there is somebody who's been behind all of this the whole time. And like, yo, I was not behind this theory until I saw that. And I was like, oh, not only is it exactly the same, I'm watching you with a period at the end.
Yeah.
So weird. White background with this like black Sharpie on the phone. Like, what is this? That M and that apostrophe, they're identical. Like, it is the same person. What do you think?
Okay, for starters, I have not lost my mind as much over an idea or a theory since like when we were doing the blacklist and I thought Tom Keene was still alive for a week. And like and I'm pretty sure everyone in the comments just like doused me with water after the fact and we're just like, settle down, champ. But I think it probably is the same person. Like there's
probably
there's a tiny part. Okay.
Let me take away that tinfoil hat from you. How dare you?
I know, I'm not, this is the thing. I think that there's so much smoke around this. And I mean, you broke down a lot of the font similarities and it's just like the only part of me that's holding me back at this point is just this idea of, okay, who all could have known about the note? And it's a very limited list of people, but at the same time, that doesn't rule it out because it is the similarities in the font between the what's on that phone screen and that note that was on Jan's door in season 1, they are very, very striking. Like, I tried to be like, whoa, okay, the I and I'm is different in one than the other.
Absolutely it is. One of them is just an I, one of them is an I with the 2 little lines on it. I will say, as someone who does not have the greatest handwriting, I have written I both ways. If I'm in a rush, just I. If I'm not in a rush, maybe I'll throw some little lines on that. I think that it's not impossible because the rest of it is so close.
The thing that is making me kind of lean in your direction, though, that this is the same person, it's that stinking period at the end of it, just because who puts a period at the end of like a 3-word message? I mean, I don't put periods at the end of any of my text messages. I don't put periods at the end of any of my direct messages, like none of that sort of stuff. And it just feels very, very deliberate that it's like, okay, only a small number of people would like frame it in this exact way.
Yeah. And before we get into who we think would be doing this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We are so close to 67,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which is such a major milestone for us. And it's so exciting. And with your help, we'll be able to reach that goal if you just hit that subscribe button. Also, you end up getting 3 Only Murders every single week from us on Tuesdays with reviews and previews and Wednesdays with theory videos. So thank you so much to everyone who has hit that subscribe button to help us reach that goal.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate it. And we're also very appreciative of everyone who supports us over on Patreon. If you want to support us, just check that link out in the description below. We are covering the Penguin exclusively over there, and we are having a really, really great time, and we would love for you to be a part of that coverage as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
Who are the people that would have written that message in season 1 to Jan? Now, she was by herself when she got that message,
Yeah.
and she did look around nervously like it was somebody else, and she did drop Howard's name at one point as well.
Yeah.
I already have my tinfoil hat on, and I took yours too.
I,
So I have double the tinfoil on right
I don't have any more tinfoil to
Oh,
put on, guys.
here you go. Okay, here's the thing. I had always thought that Jan was the person who wrote that note.
Yeah.
And I understand that she was by herself when she was like, oh, who wrote this? Looking around,
Yeah.
right? But she may be just playing up to it because you don't know at any point, anybody could just walk off the elevator and catch her with that note. So if she's just standing there looking at this note, cackling to herself, and then Charles walks off the elevator, she's busted, right?
Yeah.
So I just feel like it very well could be Jan that wrote that. We know that she's out in the city and she's out in the wind, and she could be writing that to them, and she could be watching them all this time. My theory is the next person that's going to end up dead by the end of this series or the end of this season going into the next is actually going to be Jan.
Ooh, okay. See, here's the thing. I would not be super satisfied if it was Jan both in season 1 and now until you brought up that idea that Jan is the next victim, because there is a part of me where it's sort of like, okay, we've already had Jan be a big bad once. Do we really need Jan to be a big bad again? And it's like, yeah, sure, if she sets up another story, because then you're really building the show here. You're evolving it a little bit. Like, I tried to think of the possibility here too that's like, okay, is it possible that someone is intentionally being a copycat? Did they talk about the note maybe on the podcast? But even if they did, it's really hard to kind of drive up this conjecture that, are you going to describe the font, the appearance of the note in a way in which like any oddball is going to be able to replicate it?
No, but besides Jan, I mean, there's everyone else in the building, really.
Yeah.
It's, Howard, Lester, Uma, and, the Westies have been there for a while. The Westie Besties, they could have been there. Gut Milk Lady, Ursula, she's still out there. Teddy, we haven't seen him in a while. Theo, I don't think so, but he's in the building, There is quite a few people that are in the building that could be behind all of this. It just feels like now that they have brought this note on these phones, that this whole idea that there's been a big bad behind every single season since season 1 is actually coming together. Now, are these messages of I'm watching you a threat? Or are they actually warning them that they're kind of like, hey, I'm watching you guys. So like if something happens, like I got you kind of thing, but they're just doing it in a really dark, weird way.
I think what makes all of this so unbelievably tricky to me right now, and we've said this before about this season, but we'll say it again and again. This is only Murders on Hard Mode this season. Like, this is by far, I think, the most tricky and complicated series of mysteries the show has ever given us. Because the big question here to me right now is, who has Saz's phone, and how did they get a hold of it, and how are they able to use it now? Because if this is all connected to season 1, then you have to sort of think, okay, well, then this person managed to get Saz's phone earlier this season, whether they're responsible for her death or not. And then they're using it because this all goes back to Howard to me in a way. Because we already did this full video about Howard and, amidst some other people like Mabel, like Jan, and whether or not he could be behind everything like a Moriarty sort of figure. And we know that he's been around from the very beginning. And you even said that Jan tried to sort of nudge them towards Howard at one point. But if this is Howard that has put together this I'm watching you period, no, maybe it is kind of like you've just said, where he knows that the trio could be in danger and he does care about the trio and he's trying to warn them. Like, this to me would make him a little bit more complicated as like an overall big bad of the entire show, where he doesn't hate the trio. He's trying to protect them in some ways, but he's still also got some really dark stuff going on.
Yeah. So maybe he's not necessarily just straight a big bad where, yeah, maybe he's behind some of these killings, but that he is also a protector of the building. Because that's the thing about Howard
Yeah.
throughout this whole time is how much he loves the building, how much he
Yeah.
loves the people in the building, how much this building means to him. And we don't know a lot about Howard because we don't know how much is true of
Yeah.
what he says. He has said that he's a librarian. How is he paying to be able to live at the Arconia? And then he has all these odd jobs every single season. Oh, now
Yeah.
he's working on the play. Now he's working on the movie. It's just like, well, none of this money would afford you the
Yeah.
Arconia either. So like, how is this happening? And Howard is really one of the top suspects because the other thing is, okay, so the trio learned that the brothers, sisters had all these cameras
Yeah.
in all of their apartments. And then they found this one camera that didn't belong to them. That also seemed to be in the Dudnoff apartment, in all the apartments.
Yeah.
The Dudnoff apartment is really the one that I'm looking at the closest.
Mhm.
Because who would have access to that apartment? It's a small list, guys. Like, it's obviously Mabel's there, but she's not
Yeah.
filming herself. Rudy, Vince, the Sauce family, obviously the brothers, sisters, but they're like, those aren't our cameras. So if that's true, then that's off. Helga, Howard, and the trio. It's a very, very small list.
Yeah, and so you're having to basically, when you're thinking about, okay, who planted these cameras, which mind you, 720p, which, may sound like it's not that significant, but I kind of think it is for a couple of different reasons
Mhm.
here. Number one, there are a lot of, big AV nerds out there that only want to use top quality for everything, but
Yeah.
top quality is also a little bit more expensive. And if the
Right.
technology being used is a little bit more dated, it would make more sense that at 720p. So where I'm going with all of this is, let's say hypothetically that this is Howard who is planted all of this stuff, that maybe he did do some dark stuff way back when and got the ball rolling with Jan, and he saw
Yeah.
that the trio was starting to investigate. Maybe way back then he was sort of like, okay, I need to keep watch on the trio to make sure they never really start to put the pieces together that it was me. So he installed his cameras way, way back when. That's why they're a little bit older. Maybe the technology isn't as great. And as they start to expand, he just puts a couple of cameras elsewhere. And this way, also, he doesn't technically have to break in anywhere because, he's going to go to the apartments of the trios. He's going to go to the Dudenoff place. He could just bring a couple little things with him and then just like sneakily put them around.
I just wonder if Howard is not what they're trying to kind of make everybody think that he is. That it's like, okay, there's a big Moriarty that's
Yeah.
sort of been killing everybody off. Maybe it's not exactly that. And whoever are the killers are actually the killers this whole time.
Yeah.
But the reason that Jan was able to kind of sniff out Howard as like a problem or a whatever
Yeah.
is because he's in everybody's business. He is watching everybody. He is behind the scenes, almost like a Batman that's willing to come out and take out whoever needs to be taken out that's going to hurt his building,
Yeah.
hurt the people in his building, hurt anything about his life, because his entire life is the building and what's happening in the building. So he's doing some shady things with love in his heart for the building.
I said this in the last video we did all about this, that I'm okay if there's not a Moriarty. Like, I'm more than fine if every season we just have a new case we have to solve, and if all of this mystery is something a little bit more benign, albeit still a massive problem, Howard. You can't go and put hidden cameras in people's places if this is really you. It doesn't necessarily have to be that he is off somewhere, with Gravy and the millions of other pets that he seemingly had being like,
Let's talk about Dudenoff. Yay!
okay. Here's your applause.
He's dead.
Well, we're plotting that he's dead. Great. Yeah, you called this. You got this.
Yeah, I had thought that he was dead for all the reasons I've been saying in all these
Yeah.
videos. It's just, it was too weird that apartment looked like either he died in it or, and we still don't know how he died. I think either he died in the apartment and the Westy Besties found him and were like, oh no, we're going to lose our apartment. So let's just, cover this up, which is also a crime, and that's what they did. Or for whatever reason, Dudenoff was going to get rid of these apartments. And they were like, oh no, we're going to lose our apartments. Let's just kill him and cover it up and keep it going. They, I think, are definitely responsible for it. Once they were just like, oh yeah, Dudenoff is back in town. His checks are being cashed. I'm like, well, it's the Westy Besties that are cashing those checks. It has to be. They have a compartment that has a file folder filled with all this paperwork that belonged to Dudenoff. So I'm sure then they also are cashing these checks. They have to be.
I think it's an interesting, complicated situation right now, because I do think that, you're right. Obviously, the Westy Besties have some sort of really big role to play in all this. And I do think that they are probably out there cashing those checks.
For sure. How else were they able to actually offer Mabel that apartment if they didn't know that Dudenoff was dead? Like, they don't have the right to do that. They don't have those apartments. Why would they be able to offer that to her unless they knew?
And they made it very clear that, the brother sisters have not spoken to Dudenoff in years. So they really did bring in this really broad window of time as to when this could have happened. Dudenoff's remains could have been there a very long while. And, maybe we'll get a little bit more clarity on that. But a lot of this, to me, comes down to what I think is the most important person this season at this point, is someone we have not even met. And that is Helga. Because I kind of feel like at this point, Helga maybe working with, I don't know, some big organization of him. I said for a while that Dudenoff was an organization. That's obviously not true.
Maybe it's a family organization?
Yeah, it could be a family organization, or it could just be a separate organization, or it could be that Helga is just working alone in this particular profession of trying to take people out. Because I'm sort of with this idea that maybe Helga, she knew everything else that was going on with the Westy Besties. Maybe she's the person who actually did the deed. And maybe Rudy, he was okay with being with Helga for a while. But then maybe when she actually did this, he was just like, I don't know if I can handle this anymore. You have to leave. But the thing where I'm getting stuck is that pig. That pig was still at the Dudenoff place. Somebody was holding that pig in the photo that was not the Westy Besties, and nobody has taken ownership of the pig among the Westy Besties. So I gotta think that Helga was still kind of around, using that apartment for various deeds. I still kind of think that Helga was hired by whoever the responsible party is behind everything this season, and that's sort of what is getting the ball rolling. And I need to meet Helga.
Yeah, Helga, I think, is a big missing part of this, because we did see the photo that has the face scratched out with someone holding the pig, probably Helga, and that they're like, oh, she's out sort of thing.
Yeah.
My theory has been that she knows what the Westy Besties did to Dudenoff, whether they found him and they were like, oh no, let's cover this up, or he was going to get rid of their apartments and they were like, oh no, let's kill him and cover this up. And she was like, no, I'm not okay with this. This is not okay. Like, you guys are either covering up a murder or you guys are murdering someone and covering up a murder. Peace. And then we have Rudy on the other side being like, oh, she's just crazy, and just trying to make it be like, don't listen to her. She's not anything. She's no one you need to talk to, because she's just crazy. When really she's the person who's like, I know something that they did, which is why she was on the ham radio being like, the last person that came sniffing around here ended up dead. Whether that's Saz, whether that's Dudenoff, whatever it is.
I love how funny this is now, because Helga, according to the two of us, is either
a killer,
is either the most horrible person alive or the most innocent person alive. There is no in between.
Not completely innocent, because if she knows that they did it and she was just like, I'm out, and she didn't tell anybody,
okay, she's scared.
That's she can be scared, but she still didn't tell anybody. She still didn't do it. All
right. But she
ain't completely innocent.
My view is that she's the worst person alive, because here's where I'm kind of sitting with everything for now.
Yeah.
Is that Helga took out Saz. And Helga took out Saz because someone hired her to do this. And you said this for a little while, that maybe Saz was the target, and then the trio became the target.
Mhm.
That maybe this is just a function of, okay, well, now the trio are digging into everything, and
That's right.
now that's going to be a problem. And I think I think that's a really good theory, and I think that's kind of where we could be going with all of this at this point, because now that the trio are sniffing out a lot of different stuff, Helga's tried to warn them they're not going away. Now, who actually hired Helga? I kind of still think it's Glenn, and I know that Glenn got shot, and we will get more into that in this video, and we have a separate theory video coming all about how Glenn is the top suspect, but I still kind of think he's Glenn.
Listen, we've all watched Scream, and for those of you who haven't, I'm about to spoil it.
All right.
There are so many TV shows and movies where the killer ends up, you know, stabbing themselves, or like the end of Scream where the killers are stabbing each other. Be like, oh, we're going to tell this story where, you know, we're going to blame it on this person, and we were also victims. Look at us. You know, we also got stabbed. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Of course they'll believe us. That sort of feeling about it. And so I just feel like that's always a possibility, where if Glenn is behind it, that it's like, oh, well, they won't look at me because look at me. I also am a victim.
Well, it's true, and it's also a situation here where Glenn and, you know, Zach Galifianakis, who is also a
Oh,
victim
Zach.
of this.
Who's trying to get out of the movie now. He's just like, I want out so bad.
Zach is great on this season. I
He
would
really
just
is
say
funny.
he's very different than every other character. I appreciate that. But yeah, it was a very crowded room at the time in which all of this happened. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe Glenn was like, hey, you know, make it look like I'm hurt. I will make sure that I don't die because,
Right.
you know, I'm a
Honest-
stunt.
Yeah.
He's more than capable of doing something like that. However, at the same time, it's a big risk. Like, I'm just gonna throw it out there. It's a big risk to be like, I'm willing to present myself as a possible victim of this. This is why, while I kind of lean in the direction of Glenn, there's still something that's just holding me back a little bit. There's just some holes in the theory that I'm still struggling a lot with.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem now that the show has created for me
Yeah.
are these "I'm watching you" messages, because
Yes.
they weren't just sent in a text. They were very specifically sent.
Yeah.
White background, and the writing looks like a Sharpie, exactly like what Jan's message was. And even if there are a couple of inconsistencies with the handwriting, there are some parts of that handwriting, like the M, that are spot on. 10 out of 10,
Yeah.
exactly the same. Like, exactly the same. And the M is so weird that I'm just
Yeah.
like, to get that exactly the same
Yeah.
is going to be really tough. So now that I mean, for me, I'm really down this hole now that this is definitely connected to what was on Jan's door. You know, was Glenn around in season 1 and 2? No, right?
Yeah.
Was Helga? Maybe. She
I-
may have been living across in the West Tower. All everyone else was. So, like, is it possible they've been around this whole time, and that's why we're spending so much time with them? Yes, so that there isn't a big reveal at the end when it's like, it's Helga, it's Vince, it's Rudy, it's whoever, and we're like, they've been around since season 1. We haven't seen them, but we've spent enough time with them that we'll be like, okay, we accept.
This is why I'm struggling so hard. Like,
This is a tough season.
I'm not afraid to admit this, just because there's everything you just mapped out with all of it. And then the other part of it I'm having the hardest time with is just that this has all come from Saz's phone, which is the same phone that wrote the "not your blanking friend" earlier
Right.
this season. So it's like, okay, whoever has this phone, who has told them to leave, did they just get the phone did it just fall off of Saz's body somewhere? Or that just feels really unlikely. It just feels like whoever moved Saz's body would also have her phone, because they're trying to relay all of these messages. But then that becomes a problem with Glenn for all the reasons that you just mapped out. I feel like you know those gifs of like people with like the giant glasses of wine where they're just like, that is me after spending this whole weekend
I know.
trying to make this make sense, because I can't. And I feel like John Hoffman, the showrunner here, he has to be aware of how similar this note is to season one. He has to be wanting people to think about this, that if this is just some coincidence, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, and it's been mentioned out there that they know that this is still an unsolved mystery from season one. And
Yep.
since the fact that they have mentioned that they know that this note is unresolved and still
Yeah.
hanging out in the ether, and then to have this text come through on a white background
Yep.
that looks like a Sharpie with a very similar handwriting, the exact same down to the period is what it
Yeah.
actually says. It's absolutely the same person. So it might just be that person got the phone off of Saz, because that's probably when they were moving
Yeah.
the body, whoever it was that was around from season one.
I
They have to, it has to be connected. Like you said, they
Yep.
wouldn't have said on the podcast, and the handwriting, it looks like this, and it
Yeah.
was on a white piece of paper, and it looked like it was done with a black Sharpie, and don't forget the period
Yeah.
at the end. Like, none of that would have been there.
And for those of you out there that are going to be like, oh, what the showrunner said and blah, 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 that's not canon. Mabel said at the end of season one that there are still some loose ends. So this is all still canon within the only, there's nothing I enjoy more than fighting with people in comments about whether or not things are canon.
Listen, this is the other thing about creators and showrunners
Yeah.
that do interviews and say things.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're out there, lying or anything,
Yeah.
because they're not out there trying to be
Yeah.
malicious or do anything like that. But they can't give things away. So if something is asked, or they want to leave like a little teaser, or they want to be able to pull us off the scent,
Yeah.
they will say things that will do that. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Don't give it away.
Okay, we are 26 minutes into this video. We have not even talked about what makes this episode different and unique. It's a big format change. Everything in this episode is, found footage, security cameras, cell phones. You've already sighed, so give us your thoughts on this.
Listen, like, I really wanted to like this episode, and I do. Like, I like the content that was in it. It's got a lot of stuff for us to talk about. There was some cool reveals, some neat stuff that they did, and I really appreciate TV and film that try new creative ways to do things
Yeah.
and to tell stories. Now, found footage is not new. I mean, this is something that's been done for a long time. The biggest found footage success out there is the Blair Witch Project, which I also really wanted to like. The story was so interesting. The way that they put their promotional package together, it like legit felt like these three people were missing. Like, it was so well done.
Yeah, it was.
But for me, the janky camera work and sort of the camera upside down and the different cuts to different types of footage, I've never been a fan of it, and I've always had a hard time watching it, and it was the same here.
I had a hard time with it at first. Like, I got a little bit more used to it as the episode went along, and to me, this isn't my favorite episode of the season, but it's also not my least favorite. Like, the episode where we went to, the stuntman bar, and we had all that time with Glenn that at that point didn't feel like it was going anywhere. I mean, I'm already taking a little bit of an L on that clearly, but I just think that the format was distracting here or there. I mean, there were still, though, a number of funny moments. There were some reveals that clearly they paid off bigger because they wanted to do this format. Like, oh, there's all these, little hidden cameras in everybody's apartment. And I do like how it kind of presented opportunities to give us moments with some people in the building that we have not spent enough time with. I mean, we've all seen the comments about, where is Uma? Why are we not getting more Uma? Like, at least we're getting a little bit more Uma talking in this episode about how they've ruined the building, which is why I have a hard time thinking that Uma is just some big bad, because I don't think Uma can hold any secret. I think she's just going to say whatever she feels at any given moment.
Absolutely, but she is somebody who cares deeply about this building. It's, her home. It's everything to her. So, will I be surprised if she's working with somebody to sort of clear out the riffraff and the problems in the building? No, I'm not going to be surprised.
No, I'm glad that this episode did at least sort of resolve that, okay, the brother-sisters, of course, are not the people responsible for this. I don't know if any of us ever really thought that they were.
No, I didn't think that they were. But we did get to learn that they were students of Dudenoff and that they did have a very tight relationship with him until they decided to go Hollywood. And then
Yeah.
he was like, I don't know you anymore. And it broke their hearts.
I will put on my beef hat though, because my
Oh,
my biggest issue with this episode, and it was fun, and they did give us new clues, and we have a
yep.
really good cliffhanger we can talk all about in our preview, but
Hmm.
I am struggling a lot with this whole, you guys had multiple characters almost die at the end of this past episode. There's no real investigation going on in here as
Nope.
to what actually happened.
No, there was not really much going on with what happened to Glenn and Zach. I mean, even the tinsel reveal
Yeah.
in this episode was so fast that if you weren't paying attention,
Yeah.
it just was gone. And it was so subtle, like it was just behind the opening credits for, a Hulu production, and there's like this wall of thick tinsel behind it, and I'm like, that's it, that was it. That's the tinsel that they found with the brother sisters over at the apartment that they were filming the opening to their documentary, and they just happen to have a piece of background on that. Like, oh, all right.
Yeah, that was kind of I mean, just what happened at the end of last episode. It's so unbelievably crazy. And there still are a lot of things we don't have a clear answer to. And I think
Yeah.
they're important things, such as, where did the firing happen? Like, was it in the room? Was it far away? Did anybody actually see the person that's responsible? Like, that's the hardest thing. I can't believe that there's no real information on this when this has clearly got to be connected to what happened with Sass.
Yes, we ended up just getting this whole background on the brother sisters and
Yeah.
Dudenoff, which is fine. That's another story that's going on. But like, what was going on at the studio, their studio with Glenn, with Zach? What's happened? Guys, like absolutely nothing on it. And yeah, who was the target? Was it actually Glenn to be like, hey guys, I didn't do it. Look, I also am a victim in this sort of thing. Make sure you shoot for my head because I got a plate there. It'll be just fine, sort of thing. And or was it Oliver? Like, was he actually the person? Was it Zach? Like, I don't know. I was very frustrated leaving the episode without any movement on that at all. Just that Zach wants off the movie now.
We are all so lost at this point. We are about to go back to the island with John Locke and try to just solve all the mysteries there because they're probably easier to solve at this point than whatever's going on this show this season.
Yeah, this is a really, really difficult season. Like I haven't even come up yet with who I think the killer is. Like it's so all over the place. There's so many deaths this
Yeah.
season. There's so many targets this season. There's so much going
Yeah.
on that yeah, they've definitely made it a lot harder this season. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be easy to figure out.
No, like, I'm leaning towards Glenn, but I'm still not 100%. And I mean,
It's a good guess.
it's a good guess, I guess. But
No, it's
there's still not a lot of a motive. I'm like having to make a lot of the motive up in my head about a lot of it. But
yeah, I mean, like I'm still on Scott Bakula Island, but I just think that, he's got motivation. They have sprinkled a couple of
yeah,
clues and he's got the money to make all this happen. But now that this text has come in, it's like, okay, was Scott around in the beginning? Like, why would he have ever left that note on Jan's door? Like, what is going on? I don't know.
Sting had a secret roommate the whole time.
Love
And it was
this.
Scott Bakula.
That's right.
Okay, well, that's what we have here on Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 6. But be sure to hit that subscribe button because, as Jess said earlier, we are really close to 67,000
So
subscribers. We really appreciate all of your support in helping to get us there. And we also appreciate all of you who are supporting us on Patreon.
Thank
We're
you.
covering The Penguin exclusively there. Thank you so much. We'll see you here next time.